Welcome to the Empowering Smart Cities book talk. So I'll let people slowly get situated. But thank you all for joining us this afternoon, this morning, wherever you are this evening. My name is Debra Lam, and along with my co-editor, Andrea Fernandez, we are here to talk about our compilation book, Empowering Smart Cities, for community-centered public-private partnerships. We are really excited to have a great panel today to talk about each of their case studies and some of the broader kind of ramifications and best practices for each of your public-private partnerships centered on community. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Andrea.
Thanks so much, Debra. So I'm Andrea Fernandez. I'm Managing Director at C40 Cities. I lead our climate finance, knowledge, and partnerships. And I'm really excited to be with you all here today on World Environment Day to talk about these exciting partnerships that we captured in this fantastic book. And as Debra mentioned, these are urban partnerships that are driven across communities with diverse stakeholders that are really helping to shape more resilient, livable, green, healthier cities. And they share a few commonalities, which I'll just highlight before we get started. First, they're very mission-oriented. So these aren't commercial partnerships. They're really about helping improve and shape the future, the sustainability of those cities. They all embody a very strong, bold vision and a shared vision among those different actors that they work with. And those actors are diverse. They're people from local government, from academia, from private sector, from startups, from community stakeholders. And it's by leveraging the experience, the resources, the knowledge of all of those different actors that we can really drive forward these objectives. And finally, I would say the partnerships also showcase really strong leadership and political support, and that's been really essential to achieve success. So I would like to now introduce the panel. So I'll briefly introduce each person and then hand it over to them to speak about the partnership, the initiative that they represent, and tell us in 4 or 5 minutes, what the partnership is focused on, what you're trying to achieve, how it works in the community, how it works with different partners. So let me get started. And I think we are waiting for one panelist to join us. So maybe I'll introduce him last. So first, Darach McDonough from Smart Docklands. Darach is the program manager for Smart Docklands. Next, we have Grant Ervin, who is currently the Vice President of External Affairs and Sustainability at SMB USA Construction, but many of you might know him from his prior role as the Chief Resilience Officer with the City of Pittsburgh, and he's here to talk to us about the Marshall Plan for Middle America. Louise Smith, who was formerly, let's see if I've got this right, Louise, the director of the University of Hull's Aura Innovation Center. And Louise is here to talk to us about the Oh Yes Net Zero initiative in Hull in the UK. And I think we've now have we got Graeme on the line yet? I'll introduce Graeme, hoping that he's able to join us. Oh, there you are, Graeme. Okay, wonderful. Appearing under Debra's name there. So Graeme Gotz is the Director of Research for the Gauteng City Region Observatory. So first, let me pass it over to you, Graeme, if you could just tell us about the partnership, the objectives, and how you work. And I'll try to keep an eye on the time so you can spend 4 or 5 minutes to introduce yourself.
And Debra, am I able to share a quick presentation? Is that okay?
Super quick, if you can manage it in 4 or 5 minutes.
That's fine. Okay, so let me do this. Right, so this is going to be a bit of a land speed record because I never managed this presentation in less than 45 minutes, let alone 4 to 5. So maybe just to start by saying that when we think about the Gauteng City Region Observatory, we have to understand what the Gauteng City Region is. This is a very important place in South Africa. It's anchored on the city of Johannesburg that's there in the center. And if you take a protractor and draw a big circle around, it's probably about 200 kilometers north to south, 100 kilometers west to east. It includes a number of cities, towns, and nodes. It's 2% of the country, 17,000 kilometers, about 16,000 people, a quarter of the national population, a third of the national economy. It's also a political project. It's not just an actually existing place, it's a political project to govern this place better. And because we think government and its various stakeholders and partners need to be informed by the development, with knowledge about the development trends that are going underway, we really think it's important that knowledge needs to be added to the mix. So data, interpretation, etc. is important. And that's the basis for the GCRO. So we're 15 years old. We're a partnership between 4 different institutions. The Gauteng provincial government is the state level government that gives us a core grant. We are based in 2 universities, University of Johannesburg and the University of the Witwatersrand, or WITS. And we also are partnered with organized local government municipalities in the province. We're a small institution, only about 20 staff. We work at the intersection between academia and the public sphere, and we see that relationship going 2 ways. It's not just us as smart people feeding in knowledge into government so that it works better. Because we also work inside government, we have important things to say back into the academic space. This gives you a sense of the kind of work that we do. We have a bunch of research themes. I'm not going to go through any of them in any detail, but you can see examples on the screen: spatial transformation, social change, inclusive economic development, and so on and so forth. All of our outputs are put up on our public website. We see it as a library of all the materials we've done over the last 15 years. And there's a whole bunch of different things that we put out into the world, from larger research reports and occasional papers to smaller data briefs and provocations. One of the things we pride ourselves on is that we put out into the world on a monthly basis some other kind of data visualization. One of our core brands, if you like, is something called the Map of the Month. Here's one on Gauteng's urban footprint, its growth between 1990 and 2020. Because we're rooted in the academy, we also have to, by obligation, do academic publications. There's an example, a book that was just published with our support on governing city regions across the world. We also do lots of on-request government support work. Here's an example of us putting out a water security perspective for the Gauteng city region that was explicitly requested by the Premier of Gauteng. But there's lots of other examples. These are rapid research papers which serve the same function as policy briefs. And then lastly, I just wanted to highlight one of the things we're very well known for is a big quality of life survey that we run every 2 to 3 years. Involves randomly sampled interviews in every home that we identify through a random sampling process. Data is incredibly representative at all levels of the statistical geography, and it can be mapped because we have GPS coordinates for every household that we survey. Here's an example map, 13,000 dots on that screen, and that's the number of interviews that we did the last survey. We've just finished the 2023-24 survey, and data will be coming out in a few months' time. And we put out maps like this. This is a COVID risk factors map that was done just at the start of the pandemic, which gave government a really good sense of where we thought at least the challenges were greatest for communities facing COVID. And that's my land speed record introduction to the GCRO. Please visit our website. You can see all our work. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Graeme. That was great. You managed to do it, I think, within 5 minutes. And it's incredible the volume of data and analysis and information that the GCRO produces and how it's helped those critical cities in Gauteng develop. Okay, now we go over to Ireland. Darach, do you want to introduce Smart Docklands?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks a million, Andrea. A lot of crossover with Graeme there, so I'm sure it's the same across the board. Yeah, so Smart Docklands. Smart Docklands is part of part of the wider Smart Dublin district model, and that's essentially to fast track innovation in strategically selected parts of both the city and the county of Dublin. So I'm the Smart Docklands program manager, and Smart Docklands itself, it's co-funded by Dublin City Council, the local government in the city, and the Connect Research Centre. It's based out of Trinity College, and Connect would focus on future connectivity requirements and future networks. And I suppose the success of the model is that it's scaled into different parts of the city and different parts of the county. And there's 4 local authorities in Dublin, and each local authority is involved, and there's relationships and collaborations with different public bodies. Same as you referenced earlier on, Andrea, it's a non-commercial entity. And I suppose it allows governments, local governments, to engage with various sections of society to address and to identify and hopefully solve city challenges, future-proof the city, and to improve quality of life. And it probably affords the city an opportunity to test, trial, and implement various technologies before a full-blown procurement phase. And it also allows them to play around with different engagement methods. And I suppose what it allows, it kind of steps back from a lot of the other departments in a city that have a whole myriad of responsibilities and whatever, and allows them to kind of think in a slightly different way. In terms of the objectives of it, it's exceptionally broad. It's everything from sustainability considerations, telecoms, community engagement, down to the deployment of various technologies, services, and innovation models. And that includes maybe upskilling local authority staff and local communities about upcoming technologies, the importance of it, the importance of maybe like 5G, AI, and maybe the opportunities and the challenges that exist with them. In terms of how it works, it's essentially, it works as part of the quadruple helix innovation framework. Just about got that out there. And it's basically local government as the anchor between bringing in insights from academia, citizens, industry. And I suppose it's run out between ourselves, and essentially everybody who works across all the smart cities is there as an honest broker between all the different parties. And I suppose it's the main ethos is to maybe identify local problems and to address tech that kind of goes for it. So what we're trying to do here is to not deploy tech for tech's sake. So it's ideally trying to deploy something in district in Smart Docklands and scale it across the city, and as much as possible, maybe trying to scale it nationally, and then maybe through networks like this internationally, maybe in the future.
Super, thanks so much. And it's a really great example of providing that cities with that strong vision of providing that test bed for technology, for innovation, and bringing in the startups, but bigger industry as well. Okay, over to Gret.
Great, thank you. It's great here to be with everyone. My name is Ervin, and I serve as the Vice President for External Affairs and Sustainability at S&B USA, which is an infrastructure development and construction company that works directly in the P3 construction space. So we work on a large infrastructure projects through public-private finance models. But I'm talking today about the different side of this, which is the public-private partnerships on guiding directives primarily from the city sector. I used to serve as the Chief Resilience Officer for the city of Pittsburgh, where I led an effort called the Marshall Plan for Middle America, which is effectively a public policy partnership across 9 cities here in the Upper Appalachian region of the United States that consists of 4 states of Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, and Kentucky. And what we did was effectively bring together the 9 mayors and cities across that region of the major urban centers around the idea of cultivating financial resources to help advance decarbonization measures across what is effectively known here as coal country. So a lot of the vestiges of our industrial past in steel and mining in those 4 states really led to the advancement of the carbon economy that we know so well. What really was the genesis of it was the collaboration between both the staffs and the mayors of those cities through initiatives like the Bloomberg Cities Network and 100 Resilient Cities that was led by the Rockefeller Foundation, where we're simultaneously developing climate action plans or resilience strategies. And that effort started to spark a lot of opportunities for us to work collaboratively together, as well as kind of share lessons learned. And around 2019, we saw an opportunity with the pending US national election for president to basically chart the course for public policy investments related to opportunities for decarbonization. And so the Marshall Plan, which many folks are familiar with in rebuilding of Western Europe following the Second World War, General George Marshall was actually born just a little bit south of Pittsburgh. So we felt it was opportunistic to kind of take General Marshall's name and advance kind of a large funding initiative that the federal government can help lead, and then ultimately reverse the course of generational and industrial decay. And so with that, we started to integrate a number of different financing capabilities that was led by researchers from the University of Pittsburgh, University of Amherst, Massachusetts, as well as Siemens, the technology company that helped us look at the economic opportunities that basically are associated with decarbonization. So everything from your LED light replacements to electric vehicle infrastructure to solar, wind, and hydro and other major infrastructure projects. And so we developed a business model that we shared with a lot of our federal government partners to help advance that. And ultimately, those investments became tools like the Inflation Reduction Act and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So in some regards, we had success, but we also had our failures, which was effectively thinking about how do you continue this effort amidst political change, both at the local as well as state and federal level, and how do you adhere to those election cycles, but also now how do you plan for success? So a lot of the communities now are dealing with kind of that continuation challenge of how to access those resources. So many lessons learned, but also a lot of positive advancements that we've been able to attribute to the Marshall Plan efforts.
Thanks so much, Grant. And I think with so much talk around just transition, I think looking to see what has happened in Pittsburgh and what you tried to do across the Ohio River Valley is a really great example of the sort of collaboration you need to tackle something that's significant. Louise, over to you.
Oh, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. People are joining from so far, even on the panel. My name's Louise Smith, and as Andrea said, I was until last month the director of the Aura Innovation Centre for the University of Hull. Hull, for those of you who don't know, is in the northeast of England, a region that led the Industrial Revolution for many, for over 100 years. It's a region that is very much affected by climate change. It's also the region that produces the most carbon emissions in the whole of the UK. And therefore, it is logical that solutions should come from the region, given its industrial heritage, very much as Grant mentioned just now about Pennsylvania being the heart of the US. I am a linguist by training. I spent most of my career in heavy industry, so oil and gas and chemical. And I'm very passionate that solutions have to come from a grassroots, because it's and working together only through collaboration. I joined the University of Hull, which was a new departure for me, but about 7.5 years ago, when offshore wind became a real thing. Even though there was derision at the time, it was still very expensive. But now the largest operating offshore wind farms are off the coast of the Humber, in fact. We're also hoping to get big carbon capture plants built and hydrogen. So really, it is a region where a lot of heavy industry is going to change and become greener. Along with that, a real change to meet net zero targets it have to come from grassroots as well. They can't just be parachuted in from the top. And so this campaign was led by 4 founding partners, not least by Reckitt. So they're the big company that produce Dettol, Nurofen, etc. And they were a principal partner at COP26 in 2021, November 21, which was in the UK. And if you remember, those of you who are interested, action was the byword for that, and a lot of cynicism as to whether there could be real action, whether we could in fact meet 2030 net zero targets. And they came back to the Humber, where they have been for nearly 200 years, and co-opted some of us. Darach mentioned the quadruple helix. I'm fairly new to that term as well, but it makes sense because it's bringing together the 4 key partners, which are universities. They have to be there, local and regional and national government, business, but also community. And the big question there is, who is the community? But we can come on to that. The name of our partnership. So one of the things that we agreed from the beginning, so the 4 partners were the University, Reckitt, Future Humber, which represents the Humber, and Hull City Council, so local government, was that it had to be a positive campaign. We are so fed up with hearing about the doom and gloom and what's the point, we're never going to meet the targets. Well, we have to. The Humber floods often, it feels the physical effects of climate change. It also feels the social justice effects. So those who are the poorest often feel the most effects of climate change. Hull City Council run one of the largest council estates in Europe. So this is social housing. And that comes with a lot of challenges. So we came together and we decided to be positive. We also have no money and no people. So it had to be a self-sustaining, grassroots, self-financing campaign. And we called it Oh Yes, Net Zero. The idea behind it is that every action counts, no action's too small. And by doing that, we can get that momentum going from the grassroots. We're 2 years old, and we already have 50 members, which may not seem a lot to larger countries, but that amounts to about 48,000 employees. Companies have agency over the employees who are part of the community and therefore have an ability to act. It is above all about action and collaboration and partnership between the businesses. And we very early on, the objective was to use businesses to create that grassroots action because they have more time. However, the Humber, so in the UK, 99.9% of companies are what we call small and medium size, so 1 to 249 employees. Over 85% of companies in the Humber are 10 people and fewer. So they're very active, they're innovative, they're the backbone of the economy, but they don't have lots of people. So it had to be something that could be integrated into the normal day-to-day business. I think we asked companies to sign up to commit, champion, and collaborate. There's no fee. It's all about open source and helping each other. And I think we've been, just so encouraged by how companies have come together to work together, and the change is happening. Okay, we're only in year 2, but that's it. I could speak for hours like Graeme.
Thanks so much, Louise. And I think the Oh Yes Net Zero initiative is a really great example of what you can do through love of place, right? You've brought people together because they really care about the region they live in. They want to support its resilience. They want to help that region contribute to UK's net zero target. So it's a, I think, really fantastic example of also that strong private sector leadership. When you've got those strong companies, this is something that a relatively smaller, less resource city can do, any city. Okay, super. Thank you so much. So we're going to start now with the panel discussion. So I'm going to attempt to give you questions and have you take 2 to 3 minutes per response. If we can try to stick to time, that's great. So first, back to you, Graeme. The GCRO, how would you say it's helped to shape and inform policy within the cities in the region, the provincial government, And how have you navigated the political dimensions of your work, which often I know in the region, and we've just seen with elections now that have happened in South Africa, sometimes there's a bit of turmoil. There's new political leaders that come in very quickly, mayors change. How have you navigated those political dynamics and helped to shape policy?
Thanks very much, Andrea. I guess the second half of that question is the much more thorny one, particularly because where we stand right now, and I'll come to it. So maybe just to say that your question somewhat presupposes a classic model of a policy think tank that sits, somewhere close to, but just outside of government. The Brookings Institution in the US would be a good example. And that policy think tank speaks into government, and their messages may or may not be received. So I want to complicate the picture a little bit and say that because the GCO is a partnership where government and academia have sat down and agreed together that through an institutional expression, which is the GCO, they're going to do something together, which is build strategic intelligence, data analysis on the city region. In effect, in a strange way, the GCO, when it speaks, is government speaking to itself. It's a little bit of a strange way to put it. I mean, there are lots of examples of us being asked to come in and advise government on policy. One of the first pieces of work we did back in 2008, 2009 was in response to the global financial crisis, benchmark how other cities and regions elsewhere in the world were responding to that crisis. And we identified that this thing called the green economy seemed to be a new growth driver in some regions. And we sort of presented this idea to the provincial governments. And what came back was a whole lot of other requests for further work on explaining this to us. What could it potentially mean? And it opened up a whole field of programmatic research for us on the green economy, on metabolic flows, on green infrastructure, etc. And that was the start. And there's very many examples of us responding to requests for government policy support. I guess where things get more interesting, and I'll just talk about two things very quickly, is a previous executive director said, more important than that kind of work is the way in which the GCO can saturate the field with data and with information, which slowly works its way into consciousness about how this place is working, what the development dynamics are, and what needs to be responded to. And so there's not a sort of direct one-to-one relationship between we putting out a report and government picks it up and adopts a new policy. It doesn't really work like that in many cases. It's more the slow saturation of data that helps everyone have more information, more intelligence about this place. And then the other way to answer your question, I guess, is we've learned over the years that we have to, through a slow, steady process, often very patient process of building arguments, we have to shift understanding. So we try to build arguments that are understandable through more complicated reports. And those arguments are things like, it's not just the economy is stupid. You have to also, forgive the metaphor, you have to also think about multidimensional well-being if you're going to understand how to develop this place. So think about quality of life. Well, here's a bunch of data through our survey work that you can that helps you understand that. Or alternatively, we have to think about urban data science as a way to enrich through much deeper kinds of investigation what's going on in the city region. So appreciate what you can do with satellite imagery in order to track economic growth through night-lights imagery. And that's led to work that has been requested from us by the city of Johannesburg. Or alternatively, green infrastructure is as important as hard infrastructure because it's multifunctional and it's cheaper and it's good for quality of life. And because we had a 15-year project around that with 3 reports and city labs and so on and so forth, eventually we're getting city governments coming to us and saying, please will you design a policy for us on that specific thing? So it's a slow process over a period of time of building up consensus around ideas. Yeah, I mean, I guess the last question, we've enjoyed over the years an enormous amount of political maturity in Gauteng provincial government and municipalities. We often say things that are not palatable, especially when the quality of life survey results come out. Some of the results are not something that a normal politician would enjoy. Plummeting satisfaction levels with government is not something government officials want to hear, but they appreciate it because it's a truth told by an agency that is part and parcel of their efforts to try to understand what's going on. But yeah, it's a complicated field. We're not sure how the elections are going to deliver a result in terms of a new and difficult world of coalition politics. We've been very fortunate with a good amount of money as an annual grant. And of course, we hope that that's going to continue with a new government coming in.
Thanks so much. And I think it's a real testament to the credibility and the reputation you've developed that you're able to navigate those changing politics. Okay, Darach, over to you. Can you tell us a little bit about an example of a technology that's been implemented or trialed at Smart Docklands and that's had an impact on the community? And if you could also just tell us, because everyone is talking about AI, how is Smart Docklands evolving and trying to embrace technology like AI?
Yeah, no problem. I suppose I actually just saw just a question in the kind of related question in the chat just about private sector involvement, and from a question from the World Economic Forum. And we would have private sector involvement in a lot of projects we have. And we had a case study published on the establishment of a telecoms unit, dedicated telecoms unit in Dublin City Council. And that was published by the World Economic Forum with respect to public sector asset use. And that kind of started from a pilot in Smart Docklands that essentially became a new unit within the council. But I suppose one of the projects that comes to mind that is mentioned in the chapter that we wrote that I think is a great example is the development of the Smart Ring Boy project. So that was it was developed in 2020, and I know Nicola Graeme, who's on the webinar, had a far bigger play in this than I did. But it was essentially developed in 2020, and it was about identifying low-cost retrofit technology solutions that could alert, monitor, and report when ring buoys or life buoys that were on the side of the River Liffey were missing or tampered with. And the reason that came in is because it came up at a community engagement workshop that we did, essentially that it was quite a unique and issue that was kind of coming up, that people were afraid that if their loved ones got into trouble in the Liffey, that they wouldn't have the requisite safety supports that were there. And there was obviously, that's obviously the gravest thing. There was also then in comparison, like quite less significant, like financial costs from Dublin City Council, in the sense that there was 15 ring boys go missing a year, approximately 600, 15 a week, sorry, 600 a year. And that's about 20,000 euro a year cost to the council. So there was a trial period, kind of went in, different solutions were kind of were tried out. And essentially then it was, the beauty of it was after the trial was tested and implemented and then validated, it isn't something that stayed in the Docklands. So it scaled out from the Docklands area that in around 2 kilometre basis. And it went out from there to different parts of Dublin City Council. And then it's also expanded nationally. And so there's 8 other local authorities across the country of Ireland that have brought this in, because there's 31 local authorities in Ireland, and each one of them is either coastal, has a river, a body of water, a canal, a lake, whatever it is. So I just think it was a really, really good example of the type of tech that you would pass every single day, and it's completely invasive. It's there when it's needed. It's a really effective public service delivery, and a really good example of low cost, high impact technology solution.
Super. Thanks so much. That's a great example of scale up, what we want all of these partnerships to do. Okay, over to Grant. What are some of the unique approaches that the Marshall Plan used to try to integrate public-private partnerships in revitalizing those post-industrial cities along the Ohio River Valley?
Yeah, some of the unique models, I think, really were creating a common table for the conversations between the private sector and the public sector, and I'd also add kind of university or academia. And so oftentimes you see whether it's the research side or the project developers, the construction concerns, or local governments talking past one another. And so the part of the success was we were able to create this common table where we could identify projects that were of critical need to the community, whether that is reclaiming, you know, an abandoned manufacturing site, or abandoned mine land, or reclaiming waterfront area that, you know, had abandoned factories. We were able to use those identification tools to help start to connect the resources that each sector brings. So you have unique aspects, whether it's private capital or construction and development expertise, or permitting and process improvement in the public sector side, to understand the art of what is possible. So that's one side. The other thing that that table was able to provide for us was the shared lessons of successes and failures, and maybe some more lessons from our failures and our successes. And so each region across our 4 states has a lot of those same attributes. But we were able to, you know, share great design practices from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, with Athens, Ohio, or university-led research that was happening at the University of Cincinnati with the University of Pittsburgh. And so created a lot of combinations of conversations that otherwise don't happen. And that's where a lot of like the creativity was able to be generated and then shared with policymakers. So whether that's at the local or at the federal level, we were able to start to identify those needs on the ground and translate that into the acceleration of local policy and federal policy. One of the gaps that we had often identified was at the state level, in terms of how that economic development impact of decarbonization effectively could advance the economic development objectives of the states. And frankly, sometimes that was, you know, due to political proclivities more than anything else. So, you know, issues particularly around the advancement or continued advancement of the carbon economy really put the brakes on a lot of those political activities that are needed at the state level. Subsequently, we've seen some of that challenged and changed due to improvements in the use of language and recognition of resources that are available that could help, you know, all boats kind of rise with the tide. And so you've seen, you know, states like Ohio and Kentucky and West Virginia, for example, advance a lot faster than my home state of Pennsylvania on the public policy side, even though they may have Republican governors and Republican general assemblies. And so they've taken the ball and run with it, where, you know, here in Pennsylvania, we've frankly struggled a little bit with arcane policies that we haven't been able to modernize. So areas like procurement and budgeting, which, you know, sound kind of boring or like I said, arcane, but really they're kind of the key to advancing, you know, the development of infrastructure projects at scale, as well as providing contributions to decarbonization measures. So we oftentimes, you know, look with our hand out for grants and resources like that, but there's a lot of tools now that are available, like tax credits that we've lobbied for, or you know, new tools, not new tools, but they've been in the industry for a long time, like public-private financial partnerships where design, construction, finance, and operation can come together to help deliver projects faster, to lower cost, but also achieve a lot of innovation, both in the sustainability side as well as workforce advancements. So there's a lot of work to be done, but that common table is really, I think, kind of the core of having the ability to deliberate both in the development of policy, but also the advancement of implementation.
Thanks so much, Grant. And really interesting to hear about the knowledge sharing on those different models and those procurement challenges. I always say, you know, the more innovative technology you want to do or project you want to do, the harder it is to procure. So we definitely need the procurement to to come a long way. It is not the sexiest subject, but it's a huge issue facing many cities.
I was just on a panel last week in Cleveland, and I kept telling people procurement is sexy, and just keep
We've got to make
repeating
it sexy.
and right, keep repeating it, and people will start to believe it.
Absolutely. Okay, Louise, over to you. Can we hear about how the Oh Yes Net Zero has engaged SMEs? You talked about earlier around the large proportion of businesses in the Hull area being, I think, less than 10 employees. How's the initiative helped to build their capacity and engage those smaller and medium-sized enterprises?
I think just to go back and pick up on something Grant said, so procurement is absolutely key to this, because one of the reasons that, just so that everybody doesn't think that this is some lovely sort of little fair that we have and everybody's very happy. It's not. It is trying to deliver on net zero targets. One of the key problems, of course, for small and medium-sized enterprises, they don't have big sustainability teams, they don't have access to a lot of expertise, they can't afford to pay consultants lots of money to do it for them. And that's not even, to discuss the debate of whether it's anthropogenic or not. We actually are agnostic, we don't care. And we say, even if you're doing this just to make money, that's fine, because it brings efficiencies. One of the big things, though, as part of the University of Hull during COVID, we're trying to keep active and deliver for the region. One of the things, we carried out a big survey of the region's small and medium-sized enterprises. So we've got about 31,000 in the region. And what we realized was that a huge number were interested, but just didn't know where to start. The other concern is that if they don't start on their net zero journey soon, they will be excluded from the supply chain because of procurement reasons. So in the UK, our National Health Service, which I think is only second to the US Army in terms of the number of employees and turnover, has put out policy, as have a number of industrial organisations, that if you supply more than £5 million a year to the NHS, you will have to demonstrate green credentials. Now, this is because big legal, so in the UK anyway, and I'm sure it's elsewhere, will have to disclose not only financial information, but environmental and net zero information activity. So it's a real concern for the Humber particularly, and there are other regions in the UK, that if they don't do something, they will not be part of the supply chain. And in the Humber, where you have these small companies, one job loss may not sound like a lot, but you start multiplying that up, and that's going to affect a lot of the community, because these are SMEs that are very deeply embedded in the community. They are employing people they know and care deeply. And I'm not saying that companies that employ thousands of people don't, but it isn't that same kind of relationship. The other thing I would say is this is about people. This isn't about developing a process or a model. It's about people. And it's hard because not everybody wants to do it the same way. So how do you create a movement? The environmental sector has long been experts at creating a movement, an action movement. So there's no recipe, but I think one thing that we have found that has been extraordinary in our experience has been how those who are very active and the larger organizations have bent over backwards to support the smaller companies. Now, you might say, oh, well, it's in their self-interest because of their scope 3 emissions. But does that matter? We're all self-interested if we're all honest. So working together, and one of the things that, just a short story. So a couple of years ago, a big world consultancy called Partners in Performance came, and they work with big companies, came to me and said, oh, we want to get involved. And I kept saying to them, we know we have got no money. We've got no money. And they kept saying, no, we want to help you. And I'm thinking, yeah, no such thing as a free lunch. How's this going to work out? But they truly wanted to help pro bono. And so they've very much been in the background supporting us as we develop these carbon clinics. And really, this was a facilitated conversation, usually between a large company, say, big brother, big sister, with a little brother, little sister organization. You asked, how do the small companies do this? And these conversations have been amazing. So one big company I won't use any names, but they're in the heating business. And we sat down their head of engineering with one of their smaller suppliers that make molded plastic, a key component to their equipment. And as the conversation carried on and the big company said, well, this is what we've been doing, you know, maybe you could start to measure in this way. One of the conversations that came up was the smaller company said, but we could make the parts smaller. And the head of engineering says, so if we involved you in the design process at the beginning, we could cut our net zero as well. I mean, these are the sorts of conversations, and it takes time and patience, as Grant mentioned, but it is those that where the real value is. And you can't make that into a process. You can't say, oh, here's the recipe. If you do this, then that will happen. I think there's got to be a real desire. I think, you know, you mentioned it, Andrea, at the beginning. What were the things that united all of us all over the world, you know, whether it's in Ireland or South Africa or in the US or in the UK? And I think we're mission. So you've got to, it's from the heart, not from the head. Although as a university, you know, we do like it to be very much from the head, but it is from the heart. Leadership. I think if we hadn't had Reckitt's, you know, this for me, Reckitt's are very, they like to be in the background, but this is real corporate social responsibility. This isn't the PR puff with the report to society. They are subsidizing this and providing us with people and helping us keep it on track. And I think that's real action and the role that they need to play. I think agility, you've got to be able to turn on a penny. And take advantage of what already exists. You can't always create from scratch. And in fact, we shouldn't, because how then do you embed it? I think it needs creativity. So never stymieing it, and try it. If it doesn't work, drop it, move on to the next thing. And I think trying to engender that mission against cynicism, I think, and be positive, and everything counts. And how do we help each other measure? Because without collaboration and partnership, it's never going to work. And you know, we may miss our targets, but what's the alternative? You do nothing.
Super. Thank you, Louise. And really great to hear your thoughts on what's really made it successful and some of those lessons. We want to turn to auto question, but I'm just going to give, I know, Louise, you got a chance to share your thoughts around some of those lessons and advice, but maybe quickly, 30 seconds each or something, Darach, Grant, and Graeme, to just talk about, you know, what are some of the either lessons you've learned or how you've evolved some or advice for others very quickly. Graeme, first we'll start with you, if that's all right.
Sure. I mean, I guess maybe just to say that one of the key lessons that we've learned over the years, just because so many people who hear about our model are surprised by what we say, that we've been extremely fortunate to have a core grant that is consistent over 15 years. It provides a reliable and absolutely stable basis for operations. And the contributions then from the universities, which are in-kind contributions, you know, we don't have to pay for security or telephone services and so on. So many other organizations out there have to scrabble for money on, you know, trying to access research grants, you know, and often compromising what they really would like to do because they just can't do something in order to get some sort of money in. So one of our key lessons has been that core grant is absolutely crucial to making this kind of enterprise work. And it's really difficult for government stakeholders to commit to it because there's always a sense that you've got to move the project to sustainability. And sustainability is often code for the core granting. The core grant will taper off and then you'll have to find your own money. But that stable core financing is absolutely crucial for building long-term projects like a quality of life survey, which is, you know, routinely done every 2 to 3 years, is absolutely required for, you know, the progressive development of bodies of data that can track trends over long periods of time. So, you know, that for us has been, we've been very fortunate. It's absolutely crucial. And then I guess just quickly to say there's always going to be growing pains with an organization. There's going to be ups and downs. And what matters at the end of the day is, do you have the systems in place to manage churn and change? And we've had to develop those systems over a period of time and then reach decisions about how large we want to go. It's not an infinite growth path, right? We've stabilized at around 20 people. We were once 5 in a much easier organization. And we've said to ourselves, we don't want to be 50 people. It's too big. It's too complicated. It's a different kind of beast. So to make clear choices about what you want to be, at what size, and build clear, stable systems around that.
Fantastic. Okay, Darach, super quickly because we are running out of time.
No worries. Look, I suppose the whole point, and people have referenced it, is that these things do iterate and they do evolve. And, it probably started, Smart Docklands in the district model probably started maybe prioritizing pilots, from the get-go. And even the Ring Boys themselves were kind of the next step on, because the innovative procurement method that they used allowed them to be piloted and tested before purchasing. So the private companies got access to local government expertise, and the local government got access to better solutions that ultimately scaled up. So it supported SMEs, a far more agile environment than traditional procurement was, and it certainly is. And I suppose the development then that's kind of happened on top of that is we have a really extensive engagement program with primary schools, secondary schools, local communities, and local authority staff, upskilling everybody, making sure that we're addressing and we're lessening in the digital divide. And we're going into areas, particularly schools for lower socioeconomic areas, and kind of teach them about STEM, how they can be involved, all this type of stuff. And I'd say the main lesson is hire great people and make sure that they're appreciated and that they drive it on.
Super. Another comment around the importance of people in these partnerships. Grant, very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly, 4 key points. One, it's important to invest in the table so that you can bring your public-private partners together. Second, I think it's important that we think of our ability to co-design and bring in our designers and builders early so that they can facilitate a better process. Third is, I think it's important for public sector entities in particular to leverage their budgets. And so if you're looking at climate investment or sustainability initiatives, start with what you have first in terms of how you're trying to achieve decarbonization. And then the final point I'd make is that particularly there's the opportunities to procure at larger scales. And that really allows you to develop greater risk sharing between the public and the private sector. And so developing kind of P3 procurement models really can help shape that with government as the facilitator. And so they can really control their destiny in terms of key performance indicators and the outcomes that they desire. The private sector will help you deliver them.
Okay, super. Another important recognition of the role of the public sector really driving this and that need for public sector support. Okay, so one of the questions that has come up from the audience is around, around the world right now, we're seeing elections happening. UK's coming up next month, India, US, South Africa, a lot of change, political change. On top of the sort of economic fluctuations and challenges that you've all faced, you've all been around during the pandemic. How have you built that resilience against changes in policies and the economy? Like how have you sort of managed it? Happy to take maybe one or two of you for a very quick response.
I would say from our perspective, there's been a lot of criticism that policy has not been sustained and it keeps changing, chopping and changing. But I think whilst national policy is very important, you have to have the local and regional, whether it's federal or as we would call it, regional government policy in place. And that stays, that's much more in touch with where real action is. And I think the big companies need to get behind it and get involved. A lot of them like to not get their hands dirty. They say, oh, we can't possibly get involved. But if you're based in a region, you are involved. You're employing people from that region. So get involved would be my advice.
Love it. Darach.
I would just say that, like, in comparison to the UK or the US, The scale, the Irish scale, is obviously an awful lot smaller. So while we do have obviously significant impacts with the local government and Dublin City Council, we would always try to kind of marry that with kind of national objectives and national alignment. And because Ireland is so small, you don't have to walk too far to make sure that alignment exists. And we'd be very, very hopeful that everything that we're doing at the local level is contributing at a national level, and probably should be supported at a national level as well.
Great. Graeme, do you want to come in as well?
One I just quickly say is we need to see third sector accountability of the local public sector. We've seen those fluctuations here locally in Pittsburgh and others where you do have change in leadership, and that loss of continuity basically steers the rudders in other directions in many cases that lead to the loss of focus on critical issues like climate and the environment and the economic development impacts of them.
And Graeme, last 10 seconds.
Yeah, maybe to say that, for many organizations, turbulence is troublesome, but for an organization like the GCO, the more turbulence, uncertainty there is, the more there's a call for the certainty that comes from better understanding through data analysis and interpretation. So moments like the pandemic were real opportunities for us to help government and stakeholders out there, the public, understand what on earth was going on. And we spent 2 years just embedded in government, trying to, think through data streams and what was happening from social data perspective in terms of the impacts of the pandemic on the community. And the same thing would go for economic turbulence. So, yeah, it's just, I guess, an advantage for us.
Great. I'm going to hand it over to Debra to close us off.
Thank you. Thank you, Darach, Andrea, Grant, Louise, and Graeme for this wonderful webinar. We learned a lot. Again, special thanks to our publisher, Institute of Engineering and Technology, and Kayla Burns for putting this all together. So really appreciate all of you coming. You'll hear from us with a recorded link of this webinar, and we'll give you the raffle winners shortly after that. So thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.